Hi everyone, it's Roger here from What's On at Disney Plus, and we're here with the What's On Disney Plus podcast. And this week we're joined by Josh, and we're going to be discussing kind of some of our highlights, disappointments of 2022 in terms of Disney Plus. But before we do any of that, quick bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already done so, make sure you check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Favorite, like, all the rest of it. You can find us on all the different social medias as well: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. So let's jump into it. So we're recording this, just so you guys know, just prior to Christmas. So hence the Christmas decorations. I'll be taking them down this weekend anyway. But yeah, let's jump into like 2022. So actually, let's start off with we're gonna go through some good things and some bad things and talk about things. So what's kind of been like one of the highlights for you from like 2022 on Disney Plus?
Well, we were talking a little bit about surprises, of course, of the year and what maybe over, delivered in terms of what we were thinking. And for me, of course, the biggest surprise, which is not really directly related to Disney Plus, is that Bob Iger is back as CEO. We've got such a wild thing, and we're going to be talking about it, I think, for a long time, for the next couple of years with him taking back over the company. But because I was actually out with family in Florida when the announcement came through. We were going to go to Disney World the next day. And my wife, her family, a lot of them have actually been cast members. Yeah. And so we're sitting there at like 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday. And I'm like, you guys won't believe this. The word it has come through that Bob Iger has become the CEO again. So it was wild. I've, seen some of your analysis of it. And yeah. I think that as it comes to Disney Plus, the truth is that, some of the best acquired titles that have come into the service, Beatles Get Back and Hamilton, Clouds, The Right Stuff, all of those have Iger's fingerprints all over them, and so yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah. I think even though they are in a cost-cutting mode moving forward, and I think that they're going to have to make profitability obviously on the service, and so we understand that. But I think he's ultimately a creative person. When he sees an opportunity, he's going to probably put the investment in it. So I'm excited about where that might go. But
yeah, I was just going to say on Bob. I remember I woke up in the morning because obviously the time difference. Woke up and my phone had gone nuts because obviously it was silent and upside down. So I woke up, one eye, and like literally I shot out of bed straight in on the computer. It's like whatever there's like. For me, it's that kind of feeling now of. I feel like with Iger there's a little bit of the idea of like, oh, he kind of was a little bit of keeping Disney Plus at the babysitting service, which I was a little bit like. I hope we don't too much down that line anymore. But there was the other side as well of like the Chapek cuts are really starting to slice into Disney Plus now. And I'm like, I think actually, yeah, you're seeing those the Chapek era starting to hit. I think for a while it was quite, but now like there's a lot of stuff that was happening and you're going, yeah, that's got Chapek's fingers all over it.
Yeah. Because we look at the last year, I think for me, the big bucket of, I think something that it's over delivered and done great as a surprise is Andor and the entire Star Wars franchise. And I think we can thank Bob Iger in a big way for that, because that show was a lot of investment. It was not just done, in the volume in front of, the screens. And I think the work that they've done there too, for a lot of those shows are really good. But this show particularly, if people have not been watching it and have not checked it out yet, which apparently the ratings tell us a lot of people have not, they need to, this is long form storytelling. It's really from an outside voice, writer, producer, Tony Gilroy coming in, who is responsible for all the Jason Bourne movies, coming in and bringing that kind of mentality to it that is very, I think, character driven, focusing on motivations, told from a variety of points of view. We get to see the rise of the Empire from a different perspective than we've seen, certainly in the films, but even in the animated shows where I've appreciated Clone Wars and, Bad Batch and how they've dealt with those themes. This builds on that in a lot of ways. And, I saw one tweet that was saying, the Easter egg I really enjoyed was the fact that the dialogue is really, really good. It's not a show about Easter eggs. It's a show about these characters that they introduce and giving you, their motivations and whether they're mechanics or whether they're, just an average guy on the street. This is how the Empire has affected them. So I would encourage people to check out Andor. It takes a little bit to get into it, but they really should not miss this. It's not a Skywalker centric series, which is something different for us. And overall, I just think Star Wars is firing on all cylinders. I mean, I really loved Obi-Wan Kenobi as well. I thought it was great to see, Ewan McGregor back, of course, Hayden Christensen. There was a lot of thought put into that show. And now looking forward to the Bad Batch and the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, all those in 2023. It's the franchise that, in a sense they started with Mandalorian, and right out the gate, gave us something that was huge, had a huge amount of buzz and excitement behind it. And, Star Wars has really sustained the service in a lot of ways. So
I feel like for me, like Obi-Wan Kenobi was a little bit like it could have done with essentially 2 episodes less. It could have done with a bit of crushing down a little bit, because I enjoyed it, but the fact that it kind of went into a second, it kind of repeated the same story twice because of how they did it. Andor, I love Andor. I love the Prison Break episodes; those are my favorite. The only thing is, and it's this kind of weird thing of it, like looking at like what's happened with season 1, I do feel like they need a few little Easter eggs or a few major like cameos to kind of satisfy that whole side of the audience, because there's a whole load of people just haven't watched it because they just have something weird about Andor. It didn't connect with people in the same way, and most of us would say it's a better show. It's a much better show, but it just didn't connect in the same way, because Mando had kind of got everyone into this like cameo of the week kind of like, and lots of connections. And I feel like maybe if they did 1 or 2 in that, if you're doing it in 12 episodes, you can have 1 or 2 little ones. It might have helped peak interest. It's going to be an odd one. I loved it. I thought Andor was great, but it just seemed to just lack. I don't know if it's again like the advertising, people couldn't connect to it the same way, but yeah, it was an amazing series. Definitely a highlight of the year.
There was a miss there, I think, also with D23. I don't know why they didn't put those first 3 episodes out at D23 and just hype the heck out of it. And it was like you've got the most devoted, Disney fans in the entire world gathered in one place. Why would you not do a premiere there? So there were some misses on marketing. I feel like Iger would have recognized that, and said, "Oh, this is something we can do and make." And even because obviously what happened is that House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, those were the 2 big shows at the same time, and also She-Hulk was also going.
Yeah,
and so it just got crowded out. It got lost in the noise. And so I hope people don't miss, where the quality of that show. And I think moving forward, it'll do great. I think the time jump aspect of it, and I'm sure there'll be some more Easter eggs and things that they'll put in for the fans. So I have no doubt it'll be great.
I am hoping actually that with Ahsoka that they might actually bump it back to 2024. I'm hoping that we just have like Mando season 3 and maybe Skeleton Crew, and obviously we've got the Bad Batch. I kind of feel like 3 series a year it's borderline. Is it too much? And we went for years. We went for a decade where we went from Ewok movie to Phantom Menace. We've lived through. I think we can survive a few months.
Yeah, I doubt that Skeleton Crew is going to come next year. Maybe you're hearing different things, but I think that Ahsoka though has been filmed. So I think it'll be Bad Batch, Mandalorian season 2, and Ahsoka will probably be the Star Wars content that we're going to get, and I'm totally great with that. So I have utmost confidence.
I could flip Skeleton Crew and Ahsoka that on there. So let's talk about the other side.
A disappointment. Sure.
Well, also Marvel. Let's talk about the Marvel side of things. And that you can. And I know you like this for you. It's kind of slid into your disappointments, doesn't it?
It did, yeah, very much so. I think the new titles have been a disappointment for me. I just and maybe I'm a little bit outside the mainstream of some of this, because I know that, for instance, Doctor Strange 2, I think, won a People's Choice Award.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I did not connect with that film. I mean, it was like the whole theme of it was like, mother as monster in a sense, as, Scarlet Witch, and just the way that they reframed that character. I just did not connect with it. And to me, like, it was so busy, so loud, just not a film that I really enjoyed. And I would say the same thing about Eternals. And Thor 4, just not up my alley. I know that these still made money and that there are people out there who loved them, but it just wasn't exactly.
I'm gonna say I really enjoyed the movies. I actually really enjoyed Eternals. I thought that was I've seen it a few times now, because I love the fact that being something different. It felt fresh. I love the idea of new character. I think they could have done with a few less of them. You could have done with like half as many Eternals. I enjoyed that one. I loved Thor: Love and Thunder. I know a lot of people hate the comedy aspect to it. I love the whole characters. I actually would put, like, for me, like Black Panther: Wakanda Forever was the one out of all of them. It was my least favorite out of all of them. And Doctor Strange, I thought it was fun. It was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it. But I think I tend to like more the lighter side, and I felt like Wakanda Forever was a little bit was not as fun. It wasn't a fun movie.
Yeah, I have to admit I've not seen it yet. I really want to. My wife and I have got some tickets, so we're going to be seeing it very soon here. But yeah, I think that overall, this whole Phase 4 just hasn't been as strong. And even and when we turn to the TV shows, and I will give a positive one, is Miss Marvel. To me, Miss Marvel was absolutely the exception, and one that I loved and thought was a real fresh spin on the coming of age superhero kind of origin story. And particularly because I think Iman Vellani, the actress, is just such a perfect match for the character that she plays. Obviously, Miss Marvel is a character that loves the Marvel universe and knows the heroes, and then she becomes one herself. That's Iman Vellani, and so she's been so great in interviews, and it's a really fun story, well told. I think, honestly, if it hadn't just gotten crowded out, by some of the other, how much was going on in summer, and even honestly in the shadow of Spider-Man No Way Home, which it's another similar high school, kind of story. But there's just a lot of depth to that one, in the sense of there's some religious themes there. There are some interesting history, of the stuff between Pakistan and India that they were delving into. Yeah. Really great cast. So I think if folks haven't seen that, they really should check out Miss Marvel.
It was a bit of an odd one for me. There was whole aspects to it. I loved the first few episodes. I loved the end of it. I just felt the middle bit of it was a bit like it was unnecessary and a bit fluffy. Had that been a movie, we would have lost a lot of that. It was a kind of a bit of an odd one. Of like, it lost me in the middle of it being like, oh, we're really in like plodding territory. It's a shame because it was probably the one I was looking forward to a lot. I enjoyed it. I would love to see a second season. Looking forward to watching the Marvels. It's not like I didn't like it. I did like it, but I love the whole aspect with a fan and it just feeling fresh and different. I love the whole thing, but it just didn't quite hit the same for me. Like Moon Knight was such a better I enjoyed Moon Knight the most out of all of them.
And to me, like, I started that and just, I don't know, some of the supernatural elements I wasn't connecting with, the grittiness of it. Like, I totally connect with Daredevil, but something about that character, it just felt very psychologically dark, and it just wasn't totally up my alley. That's similar to similar to She-Hulk. Honestly, like when you start an episode with the joke about Captain America's sex life and this kind of stuff, it just wasn't up my alley. So I know there was people who loved it and really thought it was something different. Just I think some of the themes of that and everything I just didn't connect with. So there's still Miss Marvel. And honestly, it's funny because I actually watched a lot of the Marvel shows, especially early in the year, because in the wake of Spider-Man No Way Home, my wife and I were like, well, we need to watch now Daredevil and the Defenders, because it's obviously now kind of canon now that we've seen Charlie Cox in the movies. And so we did, and we're like, wow, these when you look at the quality of the writing in Daredevil, and even the Defenders, I think, brought them all together, those characters, really well. The other shows definitely pale in comparison to that. So I hope that Daredevil Born Again is going to be of that caliber, and that they're really taking time with it. And it appears that way from everything we're hearing about the production.
I feel like it definitely, to me, it feels a little bit like we just needed less. We just needed a little bit less of Marvel. I think I personally didn't like the Werewolf by Night special. I didn't enjoy that at all. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. I like the lighter side of Marvel. I like the gritty side with Moon Knight, but I feel like we just had too much. It was just too much in 2022. I am hoping that they space things out a little bit more. I feel like it was one of those things of, you can have steak every day, but eventually you get a little bit bored of it and you want some lobster.
Yes, absolutely.
So now we've done Marvel and Star Wars. Let's move on to something you're much more going to be content that you watch on Disney Plus much more than I do, and that is the preschool content. What's been your feel for 2020? I know Bluey just blown up, but what's in general your whole feel right now with like Disney Plus and its preschool content?
Well, they've been absolutely dominant, I think, and that's and there are competitors. I mean, here I am sitting on the Christmas tree, and there's a lot of Paw Patrol back here for my 1-year-old and 3-year-old. No question, they still love that property. But no question, Disney Plus has been really delivering when it comes to Bluey, which I think is very much a juggernaut. I mean, you've seen it in the ratings from Nielsen, where it's like the acquired series list top 10 will be all Netflix and Bluey. And that's happened, on several weeks and months in a row, where that show just, because it does have appeal, I think, beyond just kids. Parents and kids watch it together. They relate to it. It's a show that celebrates play, these little 7-minute episodes. So really a lot of fun. If folks are not watching it, it is worth it. I think the hype, it does live up to it. And of course, they also had even the Bluey float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. That was a big deal here in the US. But other, preschool content, you do have Spidey and His Amazing Friends, that, my kid and so many other kids in that.
My nephews, that's one of theirs ones at the minute, and watching Spidey and jumping around all over the place. Yeah.
It's a great intro to the character and to the lore. And, there's literally, I think, 18 or, other different animated spider shows that you can find on Disney Plus that kind of generally you age up and get into. So it's quite an effective kind of branding strategy they have there. The Mickey shows, they keep, the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is just, again, a ratings juggernaut when it comes to the top 10 list on Disney. They've had Mickey Mouse Funhouse. They've rolled out a lot of Mickey content, I think, for kids that keeps that character alive for, probably the 5 and under, 6 and under set. Yeah. But he's a big character still. It's still very much, a big deal.
Yeah, it's funny. It's always funny because whenever I do because every week I do a check against the trending of the US and the UK, and it's something I do every Sunday morning. And there's always been that kind of big difference of how the US market has so much more preschool stuff in, because in the UK, adults are watching Grey's Anatomy and The Walking Dead, and there's a very kind of different aspect to it. And there's always that kind of thing of like I said, American Disney Plus has always been still very much focused on that, whereas like internationally, it's very much shifted away. I wouldn't say it's shifted away from it, because it's all still there and it's still been watching it, but now there's more variety. You're seeing different things, whereas in the US, it's still those shows are just that repeat value of just watching over and over and over again. There is not really those kind of shows on Disney Plus in the US to counter that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And even from the start of the service, they always said, well, it's not just a babysitter, and we don't just have cartoons. But yeah, it is true that here in the US, they just haven't delivered, I think, a lot of things. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we go further here. But, there's just entire brands, entire franchises, 20th Century Studios, an entire, almost 100-year library of content that they've barely tapped when it comes to, especially, I think, the Disney Plus US. And I guess you guys are disappearing so many titles now. Maybe it also starts to apply to you.
I think a lot of it is cost cutting. I think it was more a lot of the stuff that got removed is the low hanging fruit of like stuff that people aren't watching. I almost review that they had a spreadsheet, the bottom 10 just cut, that kind of thing of like what people aren't watching. I was going to ask you, from your point of view, do you think there's going to be any major change in 2023 with regards to like Hulu, or do you feel like it's just going to be the same until 2024 till they can get the contracts? Or do you think they get it early, or do you think it's going to be stalemate for another year?
Really hard to predict, I think. I think Iger is going to be looking at anything he can do to make his mark. Probably they'd be wise to get that figured out sooner rather than later, And if you really want to compete with Netflix, you're going to have to combine the services and just have one global footprint, because it is odd. All their, stuff that is more for mature audiences, it so often is on Hulu still. So, because I know in a recent Q&A live stream, you were talking about Only Murders in the Building, which is one that I've watched. Yeah. There's a couple of others on Hulu that have been great. So, I think, it will be interesting to see if how quickly they solve that problem. Yeah.
So let's now talk about some of the other. What's been some of your other disappointments from 2022?
Well, we've talked about Bluey and preschool dominance in a sense, and I think that an element, though, of that we shouldn't ignore is what I would call the decline of Pixar and Disney animated features. And I know that's kind of controversial in that I have long regarded Pixar as sort of the crown jewel of the Disney, empire and kingdom. I've been watching everything since Toy Story, and think that the way that they craft stories and the way that they tell them visually is amazing. And they've also switched up a lot of times how they do things. I mean, when they brought in Brad Bird and brought in some fresh energy. So I want them to keep evolving, but I just don't think, when you look at Lightyear, I don't think it lived up to the Toy Story franchise. I think it, there were reasons for that story-wise but it just, kind of fell flat. Everyone kind of who watched it was like, this was really Andy's favorite movie, that made him obsessed.
There seems to be some kind of thing really where like sci-fi animation for kids just doesn't seem to work on like box office level and just getting people in. It just doesn't seem to. And it's not just, we're not talking like, Strange World, we're talking Lightyear, but even like if you look back at Disney as a whole, a lot of the flops are sci-fi. It just seems like Star Wars does it great, but then everything else just doesn't seem to hit the same mark.
Well, it's a fair point. I mean, Treasure Planet, of course, they lost hundreds of millions on, which is a great film, by the way. If you haven't seen it, it's an amazing movie.
Atlantis, is another
Atlantis,
one.
very true. And I would even point to a Titan AE, which
John
Disney
Carter.
John Carter, sure.
Yeah. It just feels like this general feeling of just like sci-fi for families and kids just doesn't seem to connect the same way. I don't know, because you say like with Pixar, because I felt like Turning Red was fantastic. I loved Turning Red. I thought it was really good, really well made. I loved the whole aspects to it. As of yet, I've not seen Strange World because I was waiting for the Disney Plus release. So as the time of recording, it hasn't dropped yet. But I do feel like Soul for me wasn't. I know that was a couple of years ago. I didn't enjoy that one as much. But for me, like Turning Red was like a really good film, and Lightyear was just like this just didn't. I enjoyed it, but it didn't like. It didn't. It's very vanilla. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. It just like it was okay. I enjoyed it. I didn't have any major problems with it, but it wasn't amazing.
I've loved the other three Disney Plus original Pixar films that have come out, which would be Soul, Onward. Well, I guess Onward, that sort of was released theatrically very briefly before it hit Disney Plus, and Luca. All those have been great. And actually, by the way, Doug Days as well, series of shorts that Pixar did, just excellent. People should absolutely check that out. Turning Red, I would have just a complicated, review of, because I think as a film, it is funny in many ways. And also even stylistically, it does take Pixar in a new direction. I appreciate that. It was a little bit more like almost the Mitchells versus the Machines in some of the things they were doing with some hand-drawn aspects and, the showing the emotion of the characters. It wasn't just the kind of pristine Pixar look. Yeah. It was something different. And I appreciate that. And I also enjoyed watching it with my wife, who is, grew up in that same era, right? Post 9/11. And she had kind of the whole, I guess it was all about kind of the boy band obsession. And, it was that kind of middle school years. And it was very fun to watch it with her because it was her reliving it and kind of cringing like, oh man, middle school, But I would say that from a standpoint of what kids draw from it and the takeaways, it is a bit confusing. I think that the aspect of the panda, representing the aspect of sexuality and different things and how that plays out in the story. I think that some of it was a little confusing, and I don't think you're actually maybe helping people who are like the girls who are 11, 12, 13 navigate that with this sort of story. But
for me, it was to me the whole the subcontext of it being about having a period. So I kind of looked at it the other way of like, it was so nice to have something engage with it, do it in a way that if you're quite young or don't even notice it, you could flip past it and you wouldn't even know what it was. And that was an aspect to it. But I also feel like, obviously girls and stuff, they get it early and boys need to learn it. I thought that the way that they handled it worked so well, in just giving that little bit of not going into too much detail, but just giving it more of a metaphor. But as adults, we were seeing that, whereas I think kids probably didn't even. It was just she turned into a big panda and has a big fight with her mum.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily mansplain Turning Red and my problems with it. I will let a female reviewer do that, but I think that there are aspects of it that are confusing when it comes down to it story-wise. But overall, I don't want to dismiss Pixar. I think they can still do great things, and I think that, for instance, I think next year we're still going to see their what's called the Win or Lose, series that is coming out supposedly in fall. But apparently a series of half-hour episodes dealing with a baseball team where each of the stories is told from a different point of view, almost like the movie Vantage Point or something. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think that sounds like a great concept for them. And I do think that there's an aspect of both Pixar and Disney Animation where it's getting a little, I don't know, just too cookie cutter a little bit. I mean, for instance, the Baymax series, I don't think that connected and didn't do as well as it could have. Elemental, that's on the slate from Pixar, it just looks so much like Inside Out that it just it does kind of make me wonder if that's going to be how original that concept is going to be.
I'm much more looking forward to Wish. Wish looks a little bit more interesting. I feel as well, and I don't know if I feel like with families and stuff, and you're probably much more aware of this than I am, but the whole concept of just going to the cinema with kids, it's just something. The cost and the way of doing it, they're just not going the same way that they used to years ago, and that's having a massive impact because it's not just Disney. I mean, you're looking at other than Minions, and I kind of put some of that down to the teenagers going dressed as Gru. Kind of, there's that thing of like, I just don't know if families are going in the same numbers that they used to.
Well, I think that's a fair point, and I think there are multiple reasons for that. Sometimes, I mean, I was going to make Lightyear the first opportunity for my kid to go to the theater, but I think there were, story aspects and thematic aspects of that I just don't think I was totally comfortable with. So, I think that there's an aspect of where when you start to introduce themes to young children, that you're like, as a parent, you would rather be the ones to introduce that to. It can sometimes play against you, I think, as a studio and as a service. So I think Disney needs to be thinking that through, even if they want to do a lot of mature things on Hulu and in stories like Andor, that's great. I just think you got to be aware sometimes when you're dealing with sensitive subjects to very, very young audiences, you may be turning off some of your audience. So
yeah, it's a catch-22. It's that kind of situation where I feel like they can't ignore it and they can't go. It's like too much. It's a balancing act, and they've got to try and get that right for everyone because they're selling these shows to the whole world, and so they've got to kind of get that balancing right, act right. And it's again, I think some of it just comes down to story because I feel like with Lightyear, there was some whole problems with that film. Regardless of not just one problem, there was like 7 or 8 problems with that film, and I feel Strange World kind of fell into that because even now I got no idea what that movie's about from the trailer, and there's like that was just bad advertising, and I feel like there's lots of different levels of what went wrong with them, but hopefully next year we'll kind of push on from there. But whatever was also been one of your other highlights of 2022?
Well, when you think about the surprises of Disney Plus and what they are really strong at, no question, their documentary slate is remarkable. I mean, that's certainly on the National Geographic side. They are rolling out a ton of titles there. And if you're not watching Nat Geo, I think you're really missing out on some of the depth of Disney Plus and what it has. Because, I mean, it is, in many ways, it has become, in a sense, Nat Geo Plus in some cases. And that's, I'll be the first to criticize that because I want to see more Disney library, more 20th Century Studios library, a lot more actual dramatic and, comedy content out that they put out, but if we're talking about a strength, some of the best stuff I have seen this year has been documentaries on Disney Plus. The Rescue is, kind of a very fact-based look at the Thai cave rescue that came out and really in-depth. And if you saw, by the way, which you should see, Ron Howard's 13 Lives that was out on Prime Video. This is a perfect complement to that. It tells aspects of the story that are not present in 13 Lives. And so The Rescue is just amazing, an absolute must-see documentary. I would say the same thing about Fire of Love. The volcano couple, they're volcanologists, and follows their kind of decades of working together and showing you. I think when we talk about big special effects movies, we're always wanting to know, well, show us something we've never seen before, give us visuals. And this is a documentary where you will see things you've never seen before in terms of the kind of up close footage they get with documentary with the volcanoes. They're going around the world into various African nations, European, Asian, etc., South American, to encounter these as they're going off. And so this is it's a very interesting documentary because it tries to tell a little bit of their love story, even though they're like very private individuals, and so there's not a whole lot of them on camera or talking about their relationship. But it's a fascinating film. You get amazing visuals, and also there's other documentaries I would say as well. I love that Disney keeps doing the Star Wars documentaries and Marvel, giving you a little bit of behind the scenes of each of those shows. I think that's a great feature that every streaming service should be doing. But the documentary, for instance, with Ewan McGregor talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi and giving you some of the insights behind that, and some of the stuff with him and Hayden reuniting. Great film. Really fun to watch that. And I loved their Mickey, their Mickey Mouse documentary, Mickey, the Story of a Mouse. That was great. That was, some great history, some great archive stuff, some recent thoughts on the meaning of the character, and even some criticism of some different aspects of history there. It's always important when Disney doesn't just give us PR, but actually can give us a little bit more depth. And they probably could have gone further there with Crit. But, also on the music side, they're doing great. Idina Menzel just came out. I haven't seen that yet, but I mean, there's, they're doing, I guess, a big one on Elton John. They've done a lot of these music films, and the Abbey Road Studios one, I hear, is getting great buzz.
Unfortunately, both the Idina Menzel and If These Walls Could Sing, or whatever one that was, they got delayed till January for us internationally for some bizarre reason. So I don't know. So I obviously haven't seen them yet.
Oh.
But there's a whole other aspect to the documentary stuff that Hulu, or sort of ABC News Studios, they have been churning out like documentary after documentary, like nearly weekly, every couple of weeks, and we get them over here pretty much as like Star Originals, as Disney Plus stuff. And it's amazing the amount of stuff, and some of the topics. I mean, I don't watch all of them because there's that many of them there, but they really all over the place in terms of what stories they're pulling in from. And I feel like between Nat Geo, ABC Studios, and Disney original documentary teams, you've got like so many different teams now making different stuff, and it's really, and I feel like I would say like Disney Plus in the US feels like the documentaries is where they can play a little bit safer on doing the more mature stuff. We've seen it this past month with like Retrograde, The Territory, Flag Makers. It feels like the documentaries are a little bit more willing to kind of go that little bit more edgier.
Yeah, I really want to see Retrograde. That looks excellent. I mean, that's such a critical moment of the whole pullout from Afghanistan that occurred, and I think just from a geopolitical standpoint, those are events that we all should understand. And I have several siblings who are connected to the military, etc. So that'll be. I think they absolutely should go deeper into that. Of course, they're trying here in the U.S. to keep propping up Hulu and keep that alive in the documentary space, and so we do have a lot of. A lot of those ABC News ones, of course, all land there.
Yeah.
And so it can be a little confusing to navigate. If you're wanting to see a documentary, you have to kind of go to both services and, sort through them. Honestly, I will say too, in this point, that the user interface is just something they need to really refresh. I think that the discovery aspect of finding a title on Disney Plus and making sure that the related titles are surfacing well, it just isn't happening right now. And, there's, so it does make for a very static, thing sometimes.
Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Disney Plus really hasn't changed much in terms of how it looks in a couple of years now. And we are at a point where, especially it's before it can get sorted in the US, they have got to sort this thing out, because again, it's just a hodgepodge of titles, because so much stuff is all blended in together. It can be quite difficult to find stuff. So I am hoping, if they're gonna, before they can, I feel like they have to fix that before they start sorting out what they're doing with Hulu, because they've got to do it either before or sometime to get it ready for that, because our feedback to that is they can see what's going on with it, but that's definitely an issue that I feel they need to move on to. Now, I know we're going to do.
And here's the thing too: is I think I would have zero confidence in that happening under Bob Chapek, but I think under Bob Iger, I actually think it could happen. I think he actually can recognize a problem and realize we need to make real investment here to get this right. Because I mean, things like Netflix, where they play the trailer in the hero as you're seeing it for the first time. Other aspects of the Netflix Discovery engine, which is the market leader for a reason. They need to be implementing some of those same features on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and I just feel like I think it doesn't help with them having so many different apps, the teams are spread too thin on too many different platforms, and so some consolidation will hopefully fix that all. Now, obviously, for our last one, we wanted to leave this one last because I knew this is one of your favorite things, and something that I feel like we've been talking about for like 4 years since we started. It's just, I missed last year, 2022, library content and classic content. Boy, did they! I wouldn't say they fumbled the ball. They never got on the pitch, and that's a sports reference. I'm throwing a sports reference in here. That's how bad it was. And I tell them, American football, yeah, they didn't even get on the field. They stayed in the locker room because they didn't do anything.
Yeah, it's so true. I will say, from the U.S. standpoint, that I'm going to give them a very brief praise here, which is to say, in September they rolled out, Bear in the Big Blue House and Zorro same month. I was impressed with that, or maybe it was October.
2 titles.
Yeah, 2 titles, and to their credit, I mean, goodness, Bear in the Big Blue House is 5 seasons. Zorro is 78 episodes. So, and they're all unedited. They look great. Folks who haven't seen that, and by the way, you should, because Disney watches, what you're watching, and they're going to be able to learn from that. There was also some things in February that was that were the Black History Month stuff. So they did Blackish, and they did a few other library shows that are more ABC recent ones. They also rolled out Orville, to their credit. Actually, I think worldwide.
Well, I'm going to kind of put that. I'm going to kind of cut that into 2, because I feel like we're going to split this one into general entertainment, and then we'll talk about the con. So we'll do the general entertainment stuff in a bit. But in terms of
legacy,
legacy content.
Sure. Yeah, that has been a real miss. It's been an incredible miss. And I'm about to roll out an article that we're working on that's 23 films and shows that are marking big anniversaries in 2023. And so this is a key opportunity, because with both Bear and with Zorro, they timed it to an anniversary. And so I think it was the 25th for Bear. It was the 65th, I think, with Zorro. And so they came out right at the same time as those big anniversaries were happening.
Yeah.
Same with
there's also a big one, the big 100th.
Exactly. So for the 100th, this is the big opportunity. There's not probably going to be another opportunity that will be bigger than this for Disney 100 Years of Wonder or whatever, as they're rolling out. I know they're going to do some specials, and that things are happening in the parks at Disneyland and Disney World, and that's fine. But you can't just hype it. You can't just kind of have a nice commercial and a montage that shows you 100 years of stuff. You have to actually release your titles. And they're just, from every brand, every era of Disney, they're missing stuff. And so, I know, like, we've counted up, like, it's probably close to between 800 to 1,000. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, let's add movie from 1962 that 3 people went and saw. It might not necessarily be a big hit, but there's that kind of thing of, like, you could put there's some stuff there that people have heard of, Condor. There's a whole Angels in the Field, all these kind of classic films. If you could just put a couple on a week during the 100th and just catch up. If you've got it available on another platform, if you've got it enabled on YouTube or something like that, just start. It feels like the 100th anniversary just feels like the natural way of filling it up. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't do it more during the pandemic when they didn't have new content. It just feels like the budget cuts just went, like, no, we're not spending on it. And that was the end of it. It's so true. And I think, you could, look at this content in so many different ways and slice it in many different ways. I think what you're saying about basically maybe there's 800 or 900 titles that are really, really, I think, of reasonable quality. And of those, probably at least 250 or 300 are available on other platforms like iTunes and like YouTube. And so they should be rolling those out. They're just doing it for cost reasons. But if you want to look at it in the sense of genres, for instance, musicals, they've done a TV version of The Music Man, that is getting a lot of buzz right now, that, is out on Broadway again here in the US. The old Rodgers and Hammerstein movies. They've put out Sound of Music, but that's really of that entire franchise. They could be doing King and I and South Pacific and a whole realm of Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals that they've distributed through 20th Century Studios. I'm sure that there's some music licensing involved there, but you got to pony up and say, well, our audience is worth it.
Because you kind of got like the classic Disney movies. There's also a big chunk of TV from, like the classic Disneyland show, like the 50s, but also got a lot of like modern shows like The House of Mouse, like newer stuff as well that another generation is kind of missing. But I look as well, 20th century, they really haven't dived into the vault. Aliens Aliens was the 70s. You had there's hardly anything from those early years. Planet of the Apes,
exactly,
kind of stuff. Which they've already got on Disney Plus internationally. So it's kind of I don't know if it comes down to this Hulu issue and the branding of it all, but it just feels like the 100th anniversary, something every week, classic. And also, well, because I know a lot of Americans sometimes park on, they're like they'll say, well, you've got all this stuff. Yeah, but we're not getting the old stuff anymore. Like if you look on the Canada list for this latest for January, there's like one old film, and there's, we internationally, if the US doesn't get it, the rest of the world isn't getting it. So that's the problem with some of these like titles that are coming in.
Yeah, in March, Planet of the Apes, the first one in '68. Marks its 55th anniversary. I think it's a perfect opportunity for them to hopefully roll out that entire, classic franchise out to Disney Plus. There's and I think that this idea of sci-fi and what I would call wide appeal sci-fi is absolutely a category that they should own in a big way. They're obviously bringing on Doctor Who, which is great in I think in next year, or perhaps it will still be 2024, but that's filming now, obviously.
2023 November it comes out.
Okay, well there you go. And I think with Star Wars and with what they've done in some of the Marvel films that are also kind of sci-fi, this is a category they should own. And another way they could do that is not just Planet of the Apes, but also, by the way, the X-Files. So September of next year, it marks its 30th anniversary that it came out in '93. So another great opportunity for them to really bulk up that sci-fi content. There's so much there that they could be doing. The Muppets as well. I can't miss the opportunity to mention that there was obviously a Jim Henson biopic that they're working on, and they like to say that they did the Muppet Christmas Carol, where we've marked the 30th anniversary or whatever with this one coming out. This extended anniversary, that the uncut, unedited film, that brings that song back and all that. That's great, and they even celebrated them at D23. Well, you've got so much in the vault from Muppets, that is amazing stuff. That is, classic specials that are the Muppets Tonight TV show that was out in the '90s. But stuff that's even back to late '60s with Jim Henson. Hey Cinderella and the Frog Prince, and some of these fairy tale specials that they did with Jim, with Frank Oz, with all the original crew, and they're in the world of puppetry and that they are groundbreaking and regarded as like must see films, and they're not available anywhere. It's all the Muppet, it's all Kermit, Miss Piggy, and all the crew that they had doing that. So it just makes no sense that they're not rolling that out. I appreciate that they put the Muppet Show out. And it's a great franchise. By the way, speaking of user interface that should be improved, that's another great one that needs a little bit of a refresh.
Yeah, I feel like this is I think the problem is as well is they got to put stuff on there that's going to be watched, isn't it? I mean, we definitely feels like we're in that zone now where they're looking at, and it's not just Disney, we're looking at all of them. They're all looking at going, yeah, you just not, it's costing us more than it's on there. I get that with some random old films and stuff and old series, but shifting over to like the general entertainment side. It feels like this is something that, especially in the US, it's the whole problem with like Hulu and this, like 2022 as a whole was like, we had like La Victor, we had Blackish, Grownish, the Wonder Years, the Orville, that was great to see that one get put on there. And they put like a random week where they put like Alias and La Finder out or something. And it's like, you could literally count on your two hands the shows they put on there. There's no what I would call like ABC family, like some they could put like Futurama or there's a whole host of like sitcoms. Not, and I understand the thing of like, okay, you maybe don't want to put Pam and Tommy and Welcome to Chippendales on there in the US. I can see why that might be an issue to begin with. Maybe you could put on, Modern Family or, How I Met Your Mother or something, and just kind of start getting people, with the PG-13, some of the PG-13 films and stuff, and start using that as a way of building up to putting on, the FX stuff.
Yeah, Home Improvement, of course. I mean, they've bought in now to a second season of Santa Clauses, which I don't know where that's going to go, but but I do want. I mean, so I hope that would inspire them to say, well, let's get Tim Allen's, the most popular show in the world that was going in the early '90s. Let's maybe think about putting that out on Disney Plus. I know that there were some rights issues they were working through with that, but Scrubs as well. Another another little bit more mature than, like you say, some of the stuff you see on Disney Plus, but it is a very funny and very well done show, from, the creator of Ted Lasso that gets so much buzz and excitement right now. So you're missing out on an opportunity if you don't roll out some of these comedies. Even on the drama side, Disney did do a number of big films in the 90s. Swing Kids with Christian Bale, that is kind of a World War II era show. I'd rather film Armageddon. With Jerry
that
Bruckheimer.
Was literally that was about.
It's celebrating its 25th anniversary in July of next year.
It just feels like, okay, so we know, even if we say like, we know you can't do much until Hulu's sorted, and we know you have to still keep sending stuff but they could be sending the international originals onto there to kind of boost that up. And in some ways they wouldn't grab the same attention because in being international ones. Using some of those PG-13 films from Touchstone Pictures and some of the big titles and just share them with Hulu and stuff. It just feels like, again, was it just down to budget where they just because looking at the January list, it very much feels like we've got like no budget for putting stuff on there, and that's how it feels. It just feels like they've gone, we were losing so much money on streaming, we can't put anything on there anymore. And that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the new regime, obviously Iger's back, and Alyssa Bowen, the current president of Disney Plus, is actually thinking about legacy content and realizing that there are a variety of audiences you're trying to serve. You should be thinking a lot more broadly about types of titles you can put out, not just the preschool stuff, not just the Nat Geo documentaries. For instance, extremely highly acclaimed film, Master and Commander, Far Side of the World. Yeah. Russell Crowe, that's a 20th Century Studios film, celebrates its 20th anniversary in November of next year. They need to be rolling these out. They need to be thinking this through of, what can we put out, and just so much of the classic Walt stuff. Like those of us who know the history a little bit. So obviously Walt passed away in 1966. Those early decades that he was involved and was doing a variety of different genres, a variety of different types of content for the studio. So much of that remains in the vault, so I could mention Miracle of the White Stallions, celebrating its 60th anniversary in March. His film with Haley Mills, Summer Magic, celebrating its 60th anniversary in July. So, this list, it's the 23 kind of Disney ones celebrating their anniversaries. I know by the time this is out, it'll be folks will be able to check this out. So these are all quality titles. This is not throwaway stuff. I know that there were some bad TV films made in the 70s, especially, that really probably shouldn't see the light of day. The Boy Who Talks to Badgers that they put out. But there are plenty of great things, even from the 80s and 90s, that are just missing. And it is just kind of inexplicable that they are not even thinking about them. I mean, The 9 Lives of El Fuego Baca is a great serial that's celebrating its 65th year anniversary, similar perhaps to Zorro, but he's a lawyer who's also kind of a vigilante at night. It's a really interesting story that what came out in 1958 was part of the Disneyland series, the anthology, and just hasn't been seen except in those Walt Disney Treasures DVDs that were done in really by hardly anyone. So there's a lot they should be doing for the 100th. Let's actually show that we do have a memory of so many of the great titles and of the diversity of different genres and of different things that could be put out for 100 Years of Wonder.
it's that kind of weird thing of like, there is a balancing act with all this, and they've got to to me it's at that point now where they're having to look at trying to keep preschool kids happy, younger kids happy. You've got teenagers, because I feel like teenagers are really just like lacking, because I always kind of that weird thing of like teenagers generally like something a little bit more, with a little bit more of a kick to it, a little bit more bite to it, but they're still kids. It's still that kind of weird thing of like a 14-year-old still wants, and a 15-year-old is, to me, is that thing of like, getting some of those big shows from like all the freeform stuff. There was like a little bit more edgy, but put some of this stuff on there to kind of, and the sitcoms and stuff to kind of really appeal to that audience a little bit more. Because I think trying to create content for teenagers doesn't work, because the teenagers want to watch what adults are watching, and the tweens, the younger ones, because sometimes you watch the stuff that go, this is aimed at 16 teenagers, and go, these are teenagers acting like they're 12. They're not acting like they're 8. And also there's that big difference as well of a teenager like here in the UK has a very different like type of like how the I mean, sometimes I'm watching these in like American high school stuff, and you go, that kid looks about 29. And he's got, and he's got a brand new Mercedes Benz, and his friends just turned up in a brand new BMW out with a Gucci bag, and they're like, right, okay, we're gonna like, this is so far away from life. It's just like, this just does not represent real life.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they do dismiss some of the TV films that were done in the 90s that do have a bit of a cult following. I mean, I think when that Cinderella film dropped with Whitney Houston and Brandy, last year, that was a big deal, for people like, and maybe sometimes the teens and maybe they follow some of the nostalgia that the 30 somethings and all that feel for some of these titles. I mean, there's some titles like, for instance, My Date with the President's Daughter. I see that come up continually on Twitter and other places. There's just, there are certain TV films that they should be putting out that have that kind of buzz behind them.
Well, you're almost essentially that's like, you're trying to get the nostalgia of the parents of today's kids. That's what you're trying, rather than, and in some ways, like, it's the nostalgia of our age group is what, and a little bit younger, because I feel like as an 80s kid, I feel like actually Disney Plus is all right for me. It's got a lot of my shows, but the 90s kids are missing a lot more stuff. And I don't know if that's a lot of it's like music licenses and other issues, but I think just generally 2022 has been a very mixed year. Library content has been lacking. Mm-hmm. The original content has been pretty good. I feel like 2022 was probably, and especially internationally, I mean, the amount of stuff that we've had this year has been incredible. But yeah, just as a whole, 2022 has been a good year, but I can see why in the US the view is a lot less positive.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I put out my 3 things that I thought they were really strong on, the 3 surprises, and it was Star Wars content, preschool content, because I happen to have 2 toddlers, and the documentary slate. And that's, it's not saying a lot. There's a whole aspect of comedies there and of dramas, and just stories you're not at Walt used to be amazing at, and that, by the way, you have in your vault and you have available to you that you could be rolling out on a weekly basis. So
it's kind of funny because, like, in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking to James about like our favorite films and favorites. My favorite series were primarily dominated by what would essentially be in the US Hulu originals and FX shows, because we've had some amazing like drama series been dropping, and it has, like, in some ways, like Disney Plus this year has just been incredible with the amount of stuff that's been dropping on a week-to-week basis, that it's sometimes a little bit like, sometimes it's like, oh wow, they're dropping like 10 to 15 series a week, and you can kind of look at it going, we don't need Marvel and Star Wars so much when you've got all of this other stuff dropping in. If you've got, I think in one week we had like Family Guy, Simpsons, like 911, New York, American Horror Story. We then had like The Old Man. We had, there was probably close like 911, Grey's Anatomy, Station 19, all this, and there's like kind of looking at it going, yeah, we didn't really need a new episode of Star Wars this week. There was 10 to 12 series for adults. You didn't, and that's where I feel moving forward they could probably do some cost cutting when they realize how much they're putting out across all their platforms. But because it's all in different piles, everyone goes, oh, there's not a lot over there. Well, if you put them all in one big pile, you then go, wow, that's a lot.
It's a fair point. Yeah, in the US, you don't sense that with Disney Plus, that there's too much ever. And although October and November, I think, were strong, And so I do want to praise them for that. That I think they actually thought creatively about their some of their legacy titles. Again, with Bear in the Big Blue House and Zorro, which were great. And also there were a couple of Spider-Man animated shows that dropped that showed that the Sony deal is actually coming into play. And that's really interesting to me. I think there are other franchises that could very much benefit from that. I don't know why we haven't seen the outstanding Muppet films. There are about 3 of them, including Muppets Take Manhattan, that are Sony distributed and should be showing up, I would hope, on Disney Plus to complete the franchise.
Even like all the Spider-Man films, because we were all getting them internationally, and then you got like Jumanji and the Ghost. Disney announced that deal like 18 months ago, and it still hasn't really come to anything. But yeah,
not in the US for sure.
No, it's definitely going to be interesting as we move on. But let us know what your highlights of 2022 were. Thanks again for Josh for joining me this week. We'll be back next week with another weekly Q&A, and also with our podcast plus other news videos. But on that note, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and we shall see you guys soon. Laters. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure you go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Also, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and also on our YouTube channel memberships. And I shall see you guys in another video. Laters.